The auctioneer's gavel hovered ominously in the stale air of the Coloma, California saloon as Willa Gardner stood trembling on the makeshift platform, her pride shattered but her chin defiantly high despite the tears threatening to spill down her dust-streaked cheeks. The year was 1852, and the gold rush that had brought fortune to some had brought nothing but misfortune to the 24-year-old woman who now faced the ultimate humiliation, being auctioned off for her debts following her father's death. $300 owed to the bank, $100 to the general store, and $50 to Doc Miller, bellowed the auctioneer, a portly man whose silver pocket watch glinted in the afternoon sunlight streaming through the grimy windows. Who'll pay these debts for the services of Miss Gardner? A fine woman who can cook, clean, and keep your home proper for a term of 1 year or until her debts are settled through work. The crowd of miners, gamblers, and businessmen eyed Willa with varying degrees of interest, some with kindness, others with something far more sinister. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a simple bun, her once fine dress now faded and patched in places. She had been respectable once, the daughter of a mining engineer who had come to California with dreams of striking it rich. Instead, pneumonia had taken him 3 months ago, leaving Willa alone with mounting debts and creditors who had quickly lost their patience. $450 for the lot, called out Silas Thornton, the owner of the largest saloon in town. His grin revealed tobacco-stained teeth as he looked Willa up and down. "And I'll make you a serving girl in my establishment, Miss Gardner. Might even reduce your term if you're accommodating." Willa's stomach turned at the implication, but she kept her expression neutral. She knew what happened to women who worked in Thornton's saloon. Few maintained their dignity for long. $500, rasped Jeremiah Watson, an aging rancher whose wife had died the previous winter. "Need someone to keep house." The bidding continued, each offer making Willa feel more like livestock than a human being. She fixed her gaze on the far wall, trying to disconnect herself from the proceedings, when the saloon doors swung open with a creak. The newcomer stood silhouetted against the bright afternoon sun, tall and broad-shouldered. As he stepped into the saloon, the crowd parted slightly. Willa couldn't help but notice the quiet confidence in his stride, the way the weathered leather of his duster moved with each step, the gleam of his silver spurs against well-worn boots. His face was partially obscured by the shadow of his hat brim, but she could make out a strong jaw covered in several days' worth of stubble. $750, called out Thornton, his eyes narrowing at the newcomer. $800, countered Watson. The auctioneer looked pleased as the price climbed. $800, do I hear more? The stranger moved closer to the platform, and Willa could now see his face clearly. His eyes were a startling blue against his sun-darkened skin, and there was something in them that made her heart stutter, not cruelty or lust, but a calm assessment that somehow didn't make her feel like an object. $550, said Thornton, his voice laced with anticipation. $600, called another voice from the back. The stranger reached into his coat and pulled out a leather pouch. Without speaking, he approached the auctioneer and emptied its contents onto the small table beside him. Gold coins clattered across the wood, far more than Willa's debts required. "I'll cover all of Miss Gardner's debts," he said, his voice deep and steady. $500 plus whatever else she might owe in this town. The auctioneer quickly counted the money, his eyes widening. "This is more than enough, sir, almost double what she owes." The stranger nodded. "The excess is for the lady. Consider her debts paid in full." A murmur ran through the crowd. Thornton stepped forward, his face reddening. "Now hold on a minute. That's not how this works. She's contracted for service to whoever pays." The stranger turned to face Thornton, his posture relaxed but somehow intimidating. "I'm not bidding for her services. I'm settling her accounts." He turned to the auctioneer. "I believe that once her debts are paid, Miss Gardner is free to do as she pleases. Isn't that right?" The auctioneer looked uncomfortable, glancing between Thornton and the stranger. "Well, technically, yes, but no buts," the stranger interrupted. "The debts are paid. The lady is free." Willa stared at the stranger, unable to comprehend what was happening. Why would anyone pay her debts and ask for nothing in return? It had to be a trick, some kind of cruel joke or an attempt to trap her in a debt of a different kind. "And who might you be?" demanded Thornton, stepping closer to the stranger. "Isaac Fullerton," the man replied simply. "I have a ranch outside of town." Willa had heard the name before. The Fullerton ranch was modest but successful, run by a man who kept to himself but was known to be fair in his dealings. She had never met the owner until now. The auctioneer cleared his throat. "Well, it appears Mr. Fullerton is correct. With the debts settled, Miss Gardner is no longer bound to service." He seemed almost disappointed. Isaac Fullerton turned to Willa and extended a hand to help her down from the platform. "Miss Gardner, you're free to go wherever you wish." "Your debts are cleared." Willa hesitated, searching his face for any sign of deception or ulterior motive. Finding none, she cautiously took his offered hand and stepped down. His palm was calloused but warm, the grip firm yet gentle. "Why?" she asked quietly, her voice barely audible over the disgruntled murmurs of the crowd. Isaac Fullerton's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes, compassion, perhaps. No one should be sold to pay their debts, least of all someone who's had the misfortune you've faced. Thornton wasn't ready to give up. He stepped closer, his breath reeking of whiskey. "You can't just walk in here, and I believe I just did," Fullerton interrupted, his tone still even but with an edge of steel. "The lady's business is concluded. I suggest you return to your saloon, Mr. Thornton." For a moment, it seemed Thornton might argue further, but something in Fullerton's steady gaze made him think better of it. With a final glare, he turned and stomped out, followed by several disappointed onlookers. Willa stood in stunned silence as the saloon gradually emptied, leaving her alone with her unexpected benefactor and the auctioneer who was busily counting the money. "I don't understand," she finally said, her voice stronger now. "What do you want from me?" Isaac Fullerton removed his hat, revealing thick, dark hair with a few strands of silver at the temples. He was older than she'd first thought, perhaps in his early 30s. "Nothing, Miss Gardner. As I said, your debts are paid. You're free to go where you please." The auctioneer handed Willa a small pouch with the excess money. "Here you are, Miss Gardner, $237.50. She stared at the pouch in disbelief. It was more money than she'd had in months. "Thank you," she whispered, clutching the pouch tightly. Then to Fullerton, "I don't know how I can ever repay you." He placed his hat back on his head. "There's nothing to repay. Good day, Miss Gardner." With a slight nod, he turned to leave. Willa watched him go, her mind racing. She had nowhere to stay her father's small cabin, and all their possessions had been seized to pay part of their debts. The money would help, but in a town like Coloma, a woman alone had few respectable options. "Mr. Fullerton," she called after him, making a sudden decision. "Wait, please." He paused at the door, turning back to her with a questioning look. Willa took a deep breath. I have no place to go. The bank took our cabin. I know you said you want nothing in return, but I'm a hard worker. I can cook and clean and... If you need help at your ranch, I would be grateful for the opportunity, just until I can get on my feet." Isaac studied her for a long moment. "I run a working ranch, Miss Gardner. The work is hard and the accommodations are simple." "I'm not afraid of hard work," she replied, lifting her chin. "And simple accommodations would be a palace compared to what I've had lately." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I suppose I could use some help around the place. Mrs. Hatcher comes in to cook twice a week, but she's getting on in years." He considered for another moment, then nodded. "Very well, you can have the small cabin near the main house. It needs some work, but it's private and dry." Relief flooded through Willa. "Thank you, Mr. Fullerton. I promise you won't regret it." "We'll see," he replied, not unkindly. "My wagon's outside. If you have belongings to collect, we can stop on the way." "Everything I own is in a carpetbag at the boarding house," Willa said quietly. "They allowed me to keep my personal items." Isaac nodded. "Then let's get your things and be on our way. Daylight's wasting." As they stepped out into the bright California sunshine, Willa felt a strange mixture of gratitude and apprehension. She was going to the home of a man she didn't know, a man who had just spent a small fortune to free her from what would have been a terrible fate. Either he was the most selfless person she'd ever encountered, or there was something more to Isaac Fullerton's generosity than met the eye. Either way, she was no longer being auctioned for her debts. For the first time in months, Willa Gardner felt something close to hope. The journey to the Fullerton ranch took just over an hour. After collecting Willa's modest carpetbag from the boarding house, they traveled in relative silence. Isaac Fullerton was not, it seemed, a man of many words, and Willa was too overwhelmed by the day's events to engage in small talk. The ranch itself was nestled in a valley about 5 miles outside of Coloma, with rolling hills to the west and a small creek running along the eastern edge of the property. As they crested the final hill, Willa caught her first glimpse of what would be her new home, at least temporarily. The main house was a sturdy 2-story structure built of local timber, with a wide porch wrapping around the front. A large barn stood to one side, along with several corrals holding horses of varying colors. A smaller cabin, presumably the one Isaac had mentioned, stood about 50 yards from the main house. Several other outbuildings completed the picture of a well-established working ranch. "It's lovely," Willa said, breaking the silence. Isaac glanced at her, then back at the ranch. "It serves its purpose." As they approached, a man emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. He was older, perhaps in his 60s, with a weathered face and white hair visible beneath his worn hat. "That's Hank," Isaac explained as he guided the wagon toward the main house. "Been with the ranch since my father's time. He and his wife, Martha, live in the cabin behind the barn." When they pulled up in front of the house, Isaac set the brake and jumped down, then offered a hand to help Willa. She took it, again noting the strength and unexpected gentleness in his grip. "Boss," Hank called as he approached, "wasn't expecting you back so soon." His curious gaze shifted to Willa. "Hank, this is Miss Willa Gardner," Isaac said. "She'll be staying in the old cabin and helping around the place." Hank touched the brim of his hat. "Madam, pleasure to meet you." "Likewise, Mr. Hank," Willa replied. "Just Hank, madam, no Mr. needed." Isaac retrieved Willa's carpetbag from the wagon. "Hank, is the cabin habitable?" The older man grimaced slightly. "Roof doesn't leak, if that's what you're asking. Bit dusty inside, though. Nobody's lived there since that cowhand left last autumn." "I'll clean it," Willa said quickly. "I don't mind dust," Isaac nodded. "Let me show you to it then. Hank, could you ask Martha to put together some bedding and whatever else Miss Gardner might need?" "Will do, boss," Hank replied, heading back toward the barn. Isaac led Willa to the small cabin. It was indeed dusty, with cobwebs in the corners and a musty smell that spoke of months of disuse. Still, it was solidly built, with a small fireplace, a rough wooden table with 2 chairs, a bureau, and a narrow bed frame. A single window let in the afternoon light, revealing the dancing dust motes in the air. "It's not much," Isaac said, setting her carpetbag down, "but it's private. The well is behind the main house. Outhouse is there." He pointed to a small structure about 30 yards away. "You'll take your meals at the main house unless you prefer to cook for yourself." Willa looked around, taking it all in. After months of uncertainty and fear, having a space of her own, however humble, felt like an incredible luxury. "It's perfect," she said, meaning it. "Thank you, Mr. Fullerton." He shifted uncomfortably. "Isaac is fine, no need for formalities out here." "Then thank you, Isaac," she amended. "For everything," he nodded once. "Martha will bring bedding and some cleaning supplies. Rest today and get settled. Tomorrow we can discuss your duties." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Supper's at 6 in the main house, nothing fancy, but you're welcome to join us." Before Willa could respond, he was gone, striding back toward the main house with long, purposeful steps. She watched him go, still trying to make sense of the man who had saved her from a terrible fate and asked for so little in return. True to Isaac's word, Martha Hatcher arrived within the hour, arms full of clean bedding, towels, and cleaning supplies. She was a small, energetic woman with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when she smiled. "So you're the young lady Mr. Fullerton brought back," she said, setting down her burdens. "I'm Martha, my husband Hank you've already met. Willa Gardner. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Hatcher. Martha, please, we don't stand on ceremony much out here." She looked around the cabin with a critical eye. Well, it's not too bad. Needs a woman's touch, that's all. Together, they set about making the cabin habitable. They swept and dusted, washed the single window, made up the bed with fresh linens, and Martha even produced a small vase with wildflowers to brighten the table. As they worked, Willa learned that Isaac Fullerton had inherited the ranch from his father 8 years ago. He ran cattle primarily, with some horses that he bred and trained for sale. He was known as a fair employer and an honest businessman, respected if not well-liked in town due to his reserved nature. Not one for socializing, our Mr. Fullerton, Martha explained as she helped Willa arrange her few belongings in the bureau. Keeps to himself mostly, but you won't find a better man in these parts, honest as the day is long and fair to a fault. He paid my debts, Willa said quietly. All of them plus extra, and he asked for nothing in return. Martha smiled knowingly. That sounds like him, has a strong sense of what's right. His father was the same way. She paused, looking at Willa curiously. If you don't mind my asking, how did you come to be in such a situation? Willa hesitated, then decided there was no harm in telling the truth. My father was a mining engineer. We came to California 3 years ago during the height of the gold rush. He invested everything in equipment and claims that never paid out. Then he fell ill this past winter. Pneumonia. She swallowed hard. After he died, the debts mounted. The bank took our cabin and most of our possessions. I tried to find work, but respectable work for a woman alone is hard to come by, Martha finished for her. Willa nodded. The auctioneer said it was legal indentured service to pay off debts. I had no choice. Martha's expression darkened. Legal perhaps, but not right, not for a young woman like yourself. She patted Willa's hand. Well, you're safe now. Mr. Fullerton won't let any harm come to you. By late afternoon, the cabin was clean and comfortable. Martha left Willa to rest before supper, promising to call for her when the meal was ready. Alone for the first time since the auction, Willa sat on the edge of the bed and finally let the tears come. She cried for her father, for the humiliation of being auctioned like property, and for the strange twist of fate that had brought her to this place. Most of all, she cried from relief. The crushing weight of debt had been lifted from her shoulders by a stranger's unexpected kindness. When her tears were spent, she washed her face in the basin Martha had provided and changed into her cleanest dress, a simple blue cotton that had seen better days, but was still presentable. As she pinned her hair up neatly, she made a silent promise to herself. She would work harder than Isaac Fullerton could possibly expect to prove that his kindness had not been misplaced. At precisely 6 o'clock, there was a knock at her door. It was Hank, come to escort her to supper. Martha says the food's ready, Miss Gardner. The main house was comfortably furnished, but not extravagant. The large kitchen at the back of the house served as both cooking and dining area, with a massive wooden table that could easily seat 10. Tonight, there were only 4 places set for Isaac, Hank, Martha, and herself. Isaac was already seated when they entered. He stood politely as Willa approached, waiting until she was seated before resuming his place at the head of the table. He had changed from his trail clothes into a clean shirt, though he still looked every bit the working rancher. I trust the cabin is satisfactory, he asked as Martha began serving a hearty beef stew. Very much so, Willa replied. Mrs. Hatcher Martha has been most kind in helping me settle in. Martha waved off the thanks. It's nice to have another woman around, too many men at this place. The meal was simple but delicious stew, fresh bread, and apple pie for dessert. The conversation flowed easily between Hank and Martha, with occasional contributions from Isaac. Willa remained mostly quiet, observing the dynamics between the three. It was clear that Hank and Martha were more than just employees. They were almost family to Isaac. There was an easy familiarity in their interactions, a comfortable routine born of years of shared meals and experiences. Isaac was less reserved with them than he had been with Willa, even smiling occasionally at Hank's dry humor. After the meal, as Martha began clearing the dishes, Isaac turned to Willa. If you're feeling up to it, we can discuss your duties tomorrow morning. Breakfast is at 5:30. 5:30 will be fine, Willa assured him. I'm an early riser, Isaac nodded. Good, ranch work starts early. Willa hesitated, then asked the question that had been on her mind all day. Mr. Fuller Isaac, I still don't understand why you did what you did today. Why pay my debts when you don't even know me? An uncomfortable silence fell over the kitchen. Hank and Martha exchanged glances, then Martha quietly suggested they finish the dishes later, ushering her husband out of the room. Left alone with Willa, Isaac's expression remained impassive, but his eyes held a depth of emotion that surprised her. I've seen what happens to women in your situation, he finally said, his voice low. My mother was in a similar position once before my father met her, the stories she told. He shook his head. No decent person deserves that fate. Willa felt tears threatening again and blinked them back. Well, I'm grateful, more than I can express. Isaac stood, apparently uncomfortable with her gratitude. You should get some rest. First day on a ranch can be demanding. Willa rose as well. Good night then, and thank you for the meal. He walked her to the door. In the fading light, with the mountains silhouetted against the darkening sky, the ranch looked peaceful, almost magical. It truly is beautiful here, Willa said softly. Isaac followed her gaze. It is. After a moment, he added, my father used to say this land has a way of healing broken things, people included. With that enigmatic comment, he bid her good night, and Willa made her way back to her cabin, wondering if the broken thing he spoke of was her or himself. The first rays of dawn were just beginning to paint the eastern sky when Willa awoke the next morning. She had slept better than she had in months, the combination of physical and emotional exhaustion coupled with the security of a safe place sending her into a deep, dreamless sleep. She dressed quickly in her most practical outfit, a simple brown skirt and white blouse, and braided her hair tightly to keep it out of the way. The morning air was crisp as she made her way to the main house, where lamplight already glowed from the kitchen windows. Martha was busy at the stove when Willa entered, the smell of coffee, bacon, and biscuits filling the warm kitchen. Good morning, dear, Martha greeted her. Sleep well? Wonderfully, thank you, Willa replied, moving to help without being asked. What can I do? Set the table if you would. Men will be in shortly. As if on cue, the door opened, and Hank entered, followed by Isaac and another man Willa hadn't met, younger, perhaps in his early 20s, with sandy hair and a freckled face. Morning, Miss Gardner, Isaac said with a nod. This is Thomas, our ranch hand. The young man touched his hat. Madam, breakfast was a quick, efficient affair. The men ate heartily, clearly fueling up for a long day of physical labor. Willa ate more moderately, still adjusting to regular meals after months of scarcity. When the plates were cleared, Isaac turned to Willa. If you're ready, I'll show you around the place, explain what needs doing. The tour was comprehensive. Isaac showed her the barn, the corrals, the equipment shed, the vegetable garden, currently untended and overgrown, and the chicken coop where a dozen hens provided eggs for the household. As they walked, he explained the rhythm of ranch life: early mornings, long days, and the constant cycle of tasks that kept everything functioning. Martha comes in Tuesdays and Fridays to cook and do laundry, he explained as they returned to the main house. Other days we fend for ourselves, which means a lot of beans and whatever can be thrown together quickly. Willa nodded. I can cook. My mother taught me before she passed. Isaac's expression softened slightly at the mention of her loss. I'm sorry about your mother and your father. Thank you, Willa said simply. It's been just me for some time now. They had reached the back porch of the main house. Isaac leaned against the railing, studying her. You mentioned you can cook and clean. Any other skills that might be useful on a ranch? Willa considered. I can sew and mend. I know basic medicine, how to set a bone, stitch a wound, treat common illnesses. I can read and write and do sums. She paused. I'm not afraid of animals. I've never worked with cattle specifically, but I learn quickly. Isaac nodded, seemingly satisfied. Here's what I propose. You'll take over the cooking on the days Martha isn't here. Keep the main house tidy. Help with the garden, get it producing again. If you're comfortable with it, tend the chickens and collect eggs. In exchange, you'll have room and board plus $10 a month. Willa's eyes widened. $10 a month was more than fair for the work described generous, even. That's too much, she protested. After what you've already done, I pay for honest work, Isaac interrupted. The arrangement I'm offering is the same I'd make with anyone else. More actually, since most ranch hands don't get private accommodations. Willa realized he was giving her something beyond monetary compensation dignity. By treating her as an employee rather than a charity case, he was allowing her to rebuild her pride. "Thank you," she said softly. "I accept." "Good," he replied. "You can start with breakfast tomorrow. For today, Martha suggested you might want to work on the garden. It needs attention." The garden, as Willa discovered, needed more than attention, it needed resurrection. Weeds had overtaken most of the beds, and what few vegetables remained were struggling for survival. Still, the soil was rich, and with work, it could be productive again. She spent the morning clearing weeds, turning soil, and taking inventory of what might be salvageable. By noon, her hands were blistered and her back ached, but she felt a satisfaction that had been missing from her life for too long. This was honest work with visible results, something she could point to and say, "I did that." Martha called her in for the midday meal, a simple affair of cold meat, bread, and cheese. The men didn't return from the pastures, taking their lunch with them to maximize daylight hours. "You've made good progress on that garden," Martha observed as they ate. "Been needing attention for months, but none of us have had the time." "I enjoy gardening," Willa said. "My mother always kept a beautiful one when I was young. I'm hoping to get some of these beds producing again before winter." "There are seeds in the pantry," Martha told her. "And Isaac will bring whatever else you need from town." After lunch, Willa returned to her work, losing herself in the rhythm of gardening. The afternoon sun was hot on her back and sweat dampened her blouse, but she welcomed the physical exertion. It kept her mind occupied, preventing it from dwelling on everything she had lost. She was so engrossed that she didn't notice Isaac approaching until his shadow fell across the garden bed where she was working. "You've been at it for hours," he said, a note of concern in his voice. "You should take a break before you make yourself sick." Willa sat back on her heels, pushing a stray lock of hair from her face. Her hands were filthy, her skirt stained with dirt, but she felt more alive than she had in months. "I lost track of time," she admitted. "But I've cleared almost half the beds now." Isaac surveyed her work, and Willa felt an unexpected desire for his approval. "You've done more in a day than most would in a week," he said, and she couldn't help but feel pleased by the compliment. He offered her a canteen. "Water, drink it slowly." The water was cool and refreshing. Willa hadn't realized how thirsty she was until the first sip passed her lips. "Thank you," she said, returning the canteen. Their fingers brushed briefly in the exchange, and Willa felt a strange flutter in her chest at the contact. She quickly attributed it to exhaustion. "That's enough for today," Isaac said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Clean up and rest before supper. The garden will still be here tomorrow." As he walked away, Willa found herself watching him, the confident set of his shoulders, the easy grace of his movements. There was something compelling about Isaac Fullerton, a quiet strength that drew her attention in ways she hadn't expected. Shaking off the thought, she gathered her gardening tools and headed back to her cabin. Her muscles protested as she drew water from the well for a makeshift bath. But it was the pleasant ache of accomplishment, rather than the bone-deep weariness of despair, that had been her constant companion for so many months. As she washed away the dirt of her day's labor, Willa realized something surprising. For the first time since her father's death, she felt hopeful about the future. The days quickly fell into a pattern. Willa rose before dawn to prepare breakfast for the ranch workers. Mornings were spent tending to the garden, which was gradually taking shape under her care. Afternoons were devoted to household tasks, cleaning, mending, preparing the evening meal. In the evenings, they would gather around the table, sharing the day's events over supper. Isaac was often absent during the day, riding out with Hank and Thomas to check on the cattle, mend fences, and handle the myriad tasks required to maintain the ranch. When he was present, he was polite but reserved, keeping a careful distance that Willa found both respectful and slightly disappointing, though she couldn't quite explain the latter feeling even to herself. As the days turned into weeks, Willa's garden began to flourish. New shoots of corn, beans, and squash pushed through the rich soil. The chicken coop, now under her care, was clean and orderly, the hens producing more eggs than before. She had transformed her small cabin into a cozy home, adding touches of beauty where she could wildflowers in a jar. A patchwork cushion she'd sewn from fabric scraps, a braided rug beside the bed. More than the physical changes, though, were the changes in Willa herself. The hollow-eyed, frightened woman who had stood on the auction block was disappearing, replaced by someone stronger, more confident. She slept soundly at night, ate heartily, and found joy in simple things: a perfect tomato ripening on the vine, the sunrise over the mountains, the satisfaction of a well-prepared meal enjoyed by those around her table. One evening in late August, about a month after her arrival at the ranch, Willa was returning from the chicken coop with a basket of fresh eggs when she noticed Isaac sitting alone on the porch of the main house. He was whittling something from a piece of wood, his hands moving with surprising dexterity for such large, work-roughened fingers. "Good evening," she called, approaching the porch. "Would you like some coffee? I was about to make a pot." He looked up, and for a moment, Willa thought she saw something warm in his gaze before his usual reserve returned. "Coffee would be welcome, thank you." She nodded and continued into the house, setting the egg basket on the kitchen counter before preparing the coffee. Through the window, she could see Isaac still working on his carving, his expression one of complete concentration. When the coffee was ready, she poured 2 cups and carried them outside, settling into the chair beside him. For a while they sat in companionable silence, watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of gold and crimson. "What are you making?" Willa finally asked, nodding toward the piece in his hands. Isaac held it up, a small, half-formed horse emerging from the wood. "Just passing time." "My father taught me," said idle hands lead to trouble. "It's beautiful," Willa said sincerely. "You're quite talented." He shrugged off the compliment, but Willa thought she detected a slight, pleased expression before he returned to his work. Another silence fell, but it was comfortable rather than awkward. The evening was pleasantly warm, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of sage and pine from the surrounding hills. "The garden is coming along well," Isaac remarked after a time. "You've accomplished a lot in a short while." "Thank you," Willa replied. "I've enjoyed the work. It's healing in a way." Isaac nodded as if he understood perfectly. "Land has that effect, gives back what you put into it." "Is that why you stayed?" Willa asked. "After your father passed," Isaac's hands stilled for a moment. "Partly. This place is in my blood, I suppose. My father built it from nothing. Seemed wrong to let it go." He paused, then added, "And I'm not much for town life. Too many people, too much talk." Willa smiled at that. Isaac Fullerton was indeed a man of few words, though she had noticed he spoke more freely with her now than he had at first. "What about you?" he asked unexpectedly. "What will you do when you've saved enough?" The question caught Willa off guard. She had been so focused on the present, on rebuilding her strength and sense of self, that she hadn't given much thought to the future beyond the next harvest or the next meal. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "Before all this, I thought perhaps I might teach. I had some education and I enjoy working with children," she sighed softly. "But that seems like a different life now." Isaac studied her for a moment. "The school in Coloma is looking for a teacher for next term, the last one left to get married." Willa's heart quickened at the prospect. "Really? Do you think they would consider me?" "Why wouldn't they? You're educated, capable." He shrugged. "If it's what you want, you should inquire." The fact that he had noticed the posting, remembered it, and thought to mention it to her touched Willa deeply. It suggested he saw her as more than just a temporary presence on his ranch. He was thinking about her future. "Perhaps I will," she said, smiling. "Thank you for telling me." They lapsed into silence again, but something had shifted between them. Willa felt it, a new awareness, a tentative connection forming beneath their employer-employee relationship. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Isaac set aside his carving and stood. "I should check the barn before turning in. Thank you for the coffee." Willa nodded, rising as well. "Good night, Isaac." He paused, looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Good night, Willa." It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it in his deep voice sent a surprising warmth through her. She watched him walk toward the barn, his figure silhouetted against the twilight, and acknowledged to herself what she had been trying to ignore for weeks. She was developing feelings for Isaac Fullerton. The realization was both thrilling and terrifying. He had saved her, given her a home and purpose when she had nothing. Gratitude was natural, expected even, but what she felt went beyond gratitude. She admired his quiet strength, his unfailing fairness, the gentleness that lay beneath his reserved exterior. When he entered a room, her pulse quickened. When he spoke her name, something inside her responded in a way that had nothing to do with appreciation for his kindness. Yet she had no idea if he felt anything beyond employers' concern for her. And even if he did, would he ever act on it? Isaac Fullerton was not a man who revealed his feelings easily. As Willa gathered the empty coffee cups and returned to the kitchen, she resolved to keep her growing feelings to herself. She had too much to lose by revealing them: her position, her home, the respect she had worked so hard to earn. Better to cherish what she had than risk it all for what might never be. September brought cooler temperatures and the first harvest from Willa's garden. The kitchen shelves began to fill with preserves and canned vegetables for the winter months ahead. The days grew shorter, the sunsets more spectacular, painting the ranch in gold and amber light each evening. Isaac was increasingly busy with preparations for the fall cattle drive. The ranch hands worked from dawn until well after dusk, moving herds, checking equipment, and planning routes. Meals became quick, practical affairs, with Willa often packing food for the men to take with them into the fields. Despite the increased workload, she found herself enjoying the purposeful bustle. There was satisfaction in knowing that her cooking sustained the men through their long days, that her mending kept their clothes serviceable, that her garden provided fresh food for their table. She was part of something larger than herself, contributing to the success of the ranch in tangible ways. One evening in mid-September, Willa was preparing a stew for supper when the kitchen door burst open. Thomas rushed in, his face pale beneath his tan. "Miss Gardner, is Martha here?" he asked urgently. "No, she left for town this morning," Willa replied, setting aside the knife she'd been using to chop vegetables. "What's wrong?" "It's the boss," Thomas said. "Got thrown from his horse checking the north pasture. Hank's bringing him in now." Fear gripped Willa's heart. "How bad is it?" "Don't know exactly. Hank said he hit his head pretty hard, might have broken some ribs too." Willa quickly removed the pot from the stove. "Get fresh water from the well, bring it to his room, and find clean towels in the linen cupboard." By the time Hank arrived with Isaac, Willa had prepared the bedroom and gathered what medical supplies she could find. Her heart clenched when she saw Isaac conscious but clearly in pain, his face gray, a gash on his forehead bleeding freely. "Set him down carefully," she instructed as Hank and Thomas helped Isaac to the bed. "Thomas, ride for the doctor in Coloma. Hank, help me get his boots and shirt off so I can see how bad it is." The men followed her instructions without question, recognizing the calm authority in her voice. As Thomas rode for town, Hank helped Willa assess Isaac's injuries. The head wound was dramatic but not as serious as it first appeared. More concerning were his ribs; at least 2 were broken, and the large bruise forming on his right shoulder. What happened? Willa asked as she cleaned the head wound. "Rattler," Isaac replied through gritted teeth. "Horse spooked, didn't see the ditch." "He's lucky," Hank added grimly. "Could have broken his neck." Willa worked methodically, cleaning and bandaging the head wound, then binding his ribs tightly with strips of clean cloth. When she touched his shoulder, Isaac couldn't suppress a groan of pain. "I think it's dislocated," she said. "I can try to set it, but it will hurt badly." Isaac's blue eyes met hers, filled with pain but also trust. "Do it." Hank helped hold him steady as Willa manipulated the joint. With a sickening pop that made her stomach turn, the shoulder slipped back into place. Isaac's face went even paler, and for a moment, Willa feared he might lose consciousness, but he remained awake, breathing heavily through the pain. "Done," she said softly, gently laying his arm across his chest. "Try not to move it." By the time the doctor arrived 2 hours later, Isaac was sleeping fitfully, the worst of the crisis past. The doctor examined him thoroughly, confirming Willa's assessment and treatments. "You've done well, Miss Gardner," he said as they left Isaac's room. "Not much more I could have done myself. Keep him still for a few days, watch for fever, and make sure he drinks plenty of water." After the doctor left, Willa returned to Isaac's bedside with a cup of willow bark tea for the pain. He was awake again, his eyes clearer though still shadowed with discomfort. "Doctor says you'll live," she said, helping him sit up enough to drink. "Though you're to stay in bed for at least 3 days. Isaac grimaced. 3 days, there's too much to do before the drive." "Hank and Thomas will manage," Willa replied firmly. "You'll be no use to anyone if you collapse from trying to do too much too soon." He studied her face for a moment, then sighed. "You sound like my mother, she was stubborn too." Willa smiled at that. "I'll take that as a compliment. Now drink this, it will help with the pain." As he drank the bitter tea, Isaac's eyes never left her face. "Thank you," he said when he had finished, "for taking charge, for knowing what to do." "You would have done the same for me," Willa replied simply. "Yes," he agreed, "I would have." Something passed between them, then a moment of perfect understanding, of recognition. Willa felt it like a physical touch, warming her from within. The moment broke when Isaac tried to shift position and winced in pain. Willa helped him lie back down, adjusting the pillows to support his injured shoulder. "Rest now," she said. "I'll check on you later." As she turned to leave, Isaac caught her wrist with his good hand. His touch was gentle but sent a shock of awareness through her. "Willa," he said, his voice low and serious, "I'm glad you're here." 4 simple words, yet they filled her with a happiness she couldn't quite contain. "So am I," she replied softly, allowing herself to briefly cover his hand with hers before withdrawing. In the days that followed, Willa divided her time between her usual duties and caring for Isaac. He was a difficult patient, in some ways restless, frustrated by his enforced inactivity, worried about the preparations for the cattle drive. But he was also surprisingly thoughtful, thanking her for each small service, engaging her in longer conversations than they'd had before. They talked of many things, books they had read, places they had seen, memories of their childhoods. Willa told him about growing up in Missouri, about her mother's garden and her father's dreams of finding gold in California. Isaac spoke of learning ranching from his father, of the harsh winter when he was 14 that nearly cost them the herd, of his brief time at a school back east before the call of the ranch drew him home. During these quiet conversations, the formal barriers between them gradually dissolved. Willa saw glimpses of the man beneath the reserved exterior, intelligent, occasionally humorous, deeply connected to the land he worked. And Isaac seemed to truly see her as well, not as a burden or an obligation or even just an employee, but as a woman of substance, of value. On the 4th day, against Willa's protests, Isaac insisted on getting out of bed. He was still in pain, his movements stiff and careful, but the worst had passed. By the end of the week, he was back to overseeing the ranch operations, though Willa noticed he delegated more tasks to Hank and Thomas than he had before. One evening, about 2 weeks after the accident, Willa was sitting on the porch of her cabin, enjoying the sunset and the cooling air, when she saw Isaac approaching from the main house. He walked slowly, still favoring his injured side, but his stride was becoming more natural each day. "May I join you?" he asked, gesturing to the empty chair beside her. "Of course," Willa replied, setting aside the mending she had been working on. He eased himself into the chair with only a slight wince. "Hank says the preparations for the drive are nearly complete. We'll leave next week." Willa nodded, trying to hide the sinking feeling the news gave her. The cattle drive would take Isaac and most of the hands away for at least 3 weeks, perhaps longer. The ranch would be eerily quiet without them. "That's good," she said, forcing brightness into her tone. "Everything is ready here as well. I've put up enough preserves to last the winter, and the last of the vegetables will be harvested before the first frost." Isaac turned to look at her, his expression serious. "You've transformed this place, Willa, not just the garden or the kitchen, but everything feels different with you here." The unexpected compliment warmed her. "Thank you, I've been happy here." "Have you?" he asked, a note of uncertainty in his voice that she'd never heard before. "Given the circumstances that brought you here, I wasn't sure if I resented being here," Willa finished for him when he trailed off. "No, never. This place has been my salvation. You have been my salvation." The words hung between them, more revealing than she had intended. Willa looked away, suddenly conscious of how close they were sitting, how the fading light softened his features, how his nearness affected her. "Willa," Isaac said softly, drawing her gaze back to him, "there's something I need to ask you." Her heart quickened. "Yes." He seemed to struggle for words, unusual for a man who, though quiet, was always precise in his speech. "The school position in Coloma, have you inquired about it?" The question was so unexpected that Willa blinked in confusion. "No, I haven't had the opportunity to go into town." Isaac nodded, his expression unreadable. "If you're interested, I could take you there tomorrow. The school board meets in the afternoon." Willa studied him, trying to understand what he was really saying. Did he want her to leave? Had she misread the growing connection between them? "Do you want me to take the position?" she asked directly. "Are you suggesting it's time for me to move on?" Isaac's eyes widened. "No, that's not. I thought it might be what you wanted. You mentioned teaching before. I don't want you to feel obligated to stay here if you have other aspirations." Relief flooded through Willa. "I'm not staying out of obligation, Isaac." Their eyes held, and in that moment, something shifted between them, a barrier breaking, a truth acknowledged without words. Slowly, carefully, Isaac reached out and took her hand. His palm was warm against hers, the calluses evidence of years of hard work. "Why are you staying then?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Willa's heart hammered in her chest, but she found the courage to answer truthfully. "Because this feels like home now. Because I care about this place." She took a deep breath. "Because I care about you." The last light of day caught the blue of his eyes, turning them almost luminous. "I care about you too, Willa, more than I should, perhaps." "Why shouldn't you?" she asked softly. "I brought you here to give you freedom, not to tie you to another obligation." He looked down at their joined hands. "I don't want your gratitude to be confused with other feelings." Willa understood then. He was worried she felt indebted to him, that any affection she showed was born of gratitude rather than genuine emotion. "Isaac," she said firmly, "what I feel for you has nothing to do with gratitude. Yes, you saved me from a terrible fate, and I will always be thankful for that. But the man I've come to care for is the one I've come to know in these months, honorable, kind, steadfast." He looked up at her words, hope and uncertainty warring in his expression. "Are you certain?" "I'm not an easy man, Willa. I'm set in my ways, I work too hard, and I'm not good with pretty words or grand gestures." Willa smiled at that, squeezing his hand gently. "I don't need pretty words or grand gestures. I need someone real, someone true, someone like you." The vulnerability in his eyes nearly broke her heart. This strong, capable man who faced the hardships of ranch life without flinching was afraid of rejection, afraid of misunderstanding, afraid of hoping for too much. With a courage born of certainty, Willa leaned forward and placed her free hand against his cheek. His skin was warm beneath her palm, the stubble rough against her fingers. "I'm staying because I want to, Isaac, because there's nowhere else I'd rather be." For a moment he remained still, his eyes searching hers as if seeking confirmation of what he'd heard. Then, with exquisite gentleness, he leaned in and kissed her. It was a careful kiss, mindful of his healing ribs, but it held a depth of feeling that took Willa's breath away. His hand came up to cup the back of her neck, drawing her closer as the kiss deepened from tentative exploration to something more certain, more passionate. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that for weeks," he confessed. Willa smiled, her heart full to bursting. "I've wanted you to do that for weeks," he chuckled, the sound rumbling through his chest. "We've wasted a lot of time, haven't we?" "Not wasted," Willa corrected him. "We were learning each other, building something strong. That's never wasted time." Isaac pulled back slightly to look at her, his expression filled with wonder. "How did I find you?" "You didn't," Willa reminded him, her voice teasing but with an undercurrent of seriousness. You saved me, and then you gave me the greatest gift of all, the chance to save myself." He kissed her again, and Willa knew with absolute certainty that she had found her place in the world, not just on this ranch, but with this man whose quiet strength had become the foundation of her new life. The days before the cattle drive passed in a blur of activity and newfound joy. Isaac and Willa stole moments together between their duties: a shared cup of coffee at dawn, a walk in the evening twilight, quiet conversations that stretched late into the night. Their relationship evolved naturally, built on the solid foundation of mutual respect and understanding that had been forming for months. They agreed to keep their changing relationship private for now, though Willa suspected that Martha, with her keen eyes and knowing smile, had already guessed the truth. There would be time enough for formal announcements after Isaac returned from the drive. The morning of departure came too soon. The ranch yard was a flurry of activity before dawn: horses being saddled, provisions checked, last-minute instructions given. Willa had risen early to prepare a hearty breakfast for the men and to pack food for their first days on the trail. As the sky lightened in the east, the time for goodbyes arrived. Hank and Thomas mounted their horses, ready to lead the remuda ahead of the main herd. Isaac hung back, finding a moment alone with Willa near the barn. 3 weeks, he said, taking her hands in his. 4 at the most. We'll push hard coming back. Willa nodded, determined not to show how much she would miss him. We'll be fine here. Martha will stay at the main house while you're gone, and Jeb from the neighboring ranch will check on us every few days. Isaac reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. I made this for you, he said, placing it in her palm. It was a carving of a horse, small enough to fit in her hand but detailed with remarkable precision. The animal was captured in mid-stride, its mane and tail flowing as if caught by the wind. It's beautiful, Willa said, deeply touched by the gift and what it represented: hours of patient work, thought, and care. To remember me by, Isaac said with a small smile. Willa closed her fingers around the carving. As if I could forget you. He kissed her then, a gentle but thorough kiss that held the promise of more when he returned. Wait for me, he whispered against her lips. Always, she replied. With visible reluctance, Isaac mounted his horse and gave the signal to move out. Willa stood in the yard, watching until the last rider disappeared over the ridge, the dust settling behind them. The ranch seemed unnaturally quiet without the men. Willa threw herself into her work to fill the emptiness tending the garden, preserving the last of the harvest, cleaning and organizing the main house. Martha provided company during the day, but the evenings were long and solitary. At night, Willa would sit on her porch, looking at the stars and wondering if Isaac was looking at the same constellations somewhere on the trail. She would hold his carving, tracing the smooth lines with her fingertips, finding comfort in this tangible symbol of his feelings for her. As the second week of Isaac's absence drew to a close, Willa decided to ride into Coloma for supplies and to mail a letter to her aunt in Missouri, informing her of the positive changes in her circumstances. Martha offered to accompany her, but Willa assured the older woman she would be fine on her own. The ride into town was pleasant, the October day crisp but sunny. Coloma had grown significantly since the gold rush began, transforming from a small settlement to a bustling town with proper streets, established businesses, and a growing sense of permanence. Willa completed her shopping efficiently, picking up flour, coffee, and other staples at the general store. She had just mailed her letter at the post office and was preparing to return to the ranch when a familiar voice stopped her cold. Well, if it isn't Miss Willa Gardner. Quite a change from the last time I saw you. Silas Thornton stood before her, his thumbs hooked in his vest pockets, a malicious smile playing on his lips. Willa's stomach clenched at the sight of him, memories of the auction rushing back with sickening clarity. Mr. Thornton, she acknowledged stiffly, preparing to move past him. He stepped into her path. Not so quick, Miss Gardner. I've been curious about your arrangement with Fullerton. Seemed mighty convenient, him showing up like that, paying your debts. His smile turned ugly. What services have you been providing in return? Willa felt her face flush with anger. "That is none of your business, sir. Now please step aside." "I think it is my business," Thornton insisted, moving closer. "You see, I had plans for you at my establishment, plans that were interrupted. I don't like being cheated out of what should have been mine." "I was never yours to claim," Willa said, her voice steadier than she felt. "And I never will be." Thornton's eyes narrowed dangerously. "We'll see about that. Fullerton's not here to protect you now, is he?" Out on the cattle drive, from what I hear, leaving his investment unguarded, fear flickered through Willa, but she refused to show it. "I am not anyone's investment, Mr. Thornton. Now, for the last time, please step aside." Before Thornton could respond, another voice interrupted. "Is there a problem here, Miss Gardner?" Sheriff Daniel Matthews approached, his expression concerned as he took in the tense scene. Relief flooded through Willa. "No problem, Sheriff. Mr. Thornton was just leaving." Thornton shot her a venomous look but touched his hat to the sheriff. "Just having a friendly conversation with an old acquaintance. Good day to you both." As he walked away, Sheriff Matthews turned to Willa. "Are you all right, miss? That looked rather heated." "I'm fine, thank you," Willa assured him, though her heart was still racing. "Mr. Thornton and I have history." The sheriff nodded. "I know about the auction, wasn't in town that day, or I might have put a stop to it. Never did sit right with me, that practice." He studied her face. "Fullerton treating you well out at his place?" Willa couldn't help the small smile that formed at the mention of Isaac. "Very well, Sheriff. I couldn't ask for a better employer." Something in her tone or expression must have revealed more than she intended, because the sheriff's eyebrows rose slightly. After a moment, he smiled. "Good. Fullerton's a fine man, one of the best in these parts." He glanced in the direction Thornton had gone. "Still, you be careful. Men like Thornton don't forget easily." "I will," Willa promised. "Thank you for your concern." The sheriff tipped his hat and continued on his rounds, leaving Willa to finish her errands and begin the ride back to the ranch. The encounter with Thornton had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. It was a sharp reminder of how precarious her situation had been before Isaac's intervention, and how differently things might have turned out. By the time she reached the ranch, the sun was beginning to set. Martha met her at the barn, helping to unload the supplies and noticing immediately that something was wrong. "What happened in town?" the older woman asked as they carried packages to the house. "You look troubled." Willa hesitated, then decided there was no point in hiding it. "I ran into Silas Thornton. He made some unpleasant insinuations." Martha's expression darkened. "That man is a snake. Did he threaten you?" "Not directly," Willa replied, "but he made it clear he still feels cheated by how things turned out at the auction." "You tell Isaac about this when he gets back," Martha said firmly. "Thornton's not one to let things go." Willa nodded, though she was reluctant to burden Isaac with this. He had enough concerns with managing the ranch and completing the cattle sale successfully. That night, as she sat on her porch, the carving clutched in her hand, Willa found herself listening to every small sound, jumping at the rustle of wind through the trees or the hoot of an owl. She told herself she was being foolish. Thornton was all talk, and the ranch was miles from town. Still, she found it difficult to sleep, and when she finally did, her dreams were troubled. The third week of Isaac's absence passed slowly. Willa continued her routine of work during the day and quiet evenings alone, but she couldn't shake the unease that had settled over her since the encounter with Thornton. Martha, sensing her anxiety, spent more time at the main house, often staying until after dark before returning to her own cabin. On the night Isaac was expected to return, Willa prepared a special meal: roast beef, fresh bread, apple pie made with the last of the summer's harvest. She wanted to celebrate his homecoming, to create a warm welcome after weeks on the dusty trail. But as darkness fell and there was no sign of the returning cattle drive, disappointment set in. Willa knew delays were common weather, difficult river crossings, any number of factors could slow their progress. Still, she had hoped tonight would be the night. She was just covering the food and preparing to retire to her cabin when she heard the sound of a horse approaching. Her heart leaped, thinking Isaac had ridden ahead of the main group. She hurried to the door, a welcoming smile on her face. The smile died when she saw not Isaac but Silas Thornton dismounting in the yard. He was alone, his horse breathing heavily as if it had been ridden hard. Fear gripped Willa's heart, but she steeled herself, standing firmly in the doorway. "Mr. Thornton, what brings you here at this hour?" He approached slowly, his smile sending a chill down her spine. "Just thought I'd pay a social call, Miss Gardner, see how you're getting along out here all alone." "I'm not alone," Willa lied, "and visitors are not welcome after dark," Thornton chuckled. "Oh, I think we both know you are alone. The old couple is at their cabin on the far side of the property, and Fullerton and his men won't be back for at least another day." He took another step closer. Plenty of time for us to get reacquainted. Willa's mind raced. She could try to call for Hank and Martha, but their cabin was too far for them to hear her. Running was pointless. Thornton would easily overtake her. That left one option. "Wait here," she said, forcing her voice to remain steady. "I'll get some coffee." Before Thornton could respond, she ducked inside and closed the door, quickly sliding the bolt into place. She heard him curse and then pound on the door. "Open up, Willa, don't make this difficult." Ignoring his demands, Willa ran to Isaac's study, where she knew he kept a rifle. Her hands trembled as she loaded it. Isaac had shown her how during one of their evening walks, a precaution he insisted on for her safety. At the time, it had seemed an unnecessary skill. Now, she was profoundly grateful for his foresight. The pounding at the door grew more insistent, accompanied by threats and obscenities. Willa positioned herself in the hallway, the rifle steady in her hands, pointed at the door. "Go away, Thornton," she called. "I have a rifle and I know how to use it." There was a moment of silence, then a mocking laugh. "Come now, Willa, we both know you're not going to shoot me. Put down the gun and open the door. I only want to talk." "I have nothing to say to you," Willa replied. "Leave now or I will fire a warning shot. The next one won't be a warning." She heard movement on the porch, then a crash as something heavy was thrown against the door. The wood splintered but held. Another crash, and the door frame began to give way. Taking a deep breath, Willa aimed at the ceiling and pulled the trigger. The report was deafeningly loud in the confined space, and the recoil nearly knocked her off her feet. Plaster dust rained down from where the bullet had struck. The crashing stopped. For a moment, there was complete silence. Then Thornton's voice, now with an edge of uncertainty. "You're making a big mistake, Willa. This isn't over." She heard his footsteps retreating, then the sound of his horse galloping away. Only when the hoofbeats had faded completely did Willa allow herself to lower the rifle, her arms shaking with reaction. Moving to a chair, she sank down, the rifle across her lap, and tried to calm her racing heart. The danger was past for now, but Thornton's parting words echoed in her mind. This isn't over. She couldn't stay in the main house. The damaged door wouldn't keep anyone out. Her own cabin was equally vulnerable. After a moment's thought, she gathered what she needed: the rifle, ammunition, a lantern, a blanket, and headed for the barn. The hayloft would provide better protection, allowing her to see anyone approaching while remaining hidden herself. Willa spent a sleepless night in the loft, jumping at every sound, the rifle always within reach. As dawn approached, exhaustion finally overtook her, and she dozed fitfully, only to be awakened by the sound of horses and cattle, many of them. Peering cautiously through a gap in the barn wall, she saw the most welcome sight imaginable. The cattle drive returning, Isaac at the head of the column, directing the tired cowboys as they guided the herd into the holding pasture. Relief washing over her, Willa climbed down from the loft and ran toward the main house. She needed to meet Isaac there, to warn him about Thornton, to feel safe again in his presence. She had just reached the porch when Isaac spotted her. Something in her appearance, her disheveled hair, the rifle she still carried, the damaged door behind her, made him stiffen with alarm. In an instant, he had dismounted and was striding toward her, concern etched on his features. "Willa, what happened?" he demanded, his eyes taking in every detail of her exhausted state. Before she could answer, Hank and Martha came running from their cabin, having heard the commotion of the returning drive. "Willa," Martha called, "are you all right?" "We heard a shot last night, but thought it might have been a coyote in the henhouse." Willa looked between them, suddenly overwhelmed by the events of the night and the relief of Isaac's return. "Thornton was here," she managed to say. "He tried to break in. I fired a warning shot and he left, but he said it wasn't over." Isaac's expression hardened, a cold fury filling his eyes. Without a word, he turned to Hank. "Get the men settled, then ride for the sheriff. Tell him what happened here." Hank nodded grimly and hurried to carry out the instructions. Martha moved to Willa's side, putting a supportive arm around her. "Let's get you inside, dear. You look dead on your feet." Isaac gently took the rifle from Willa's hands. "I'll check the property, make sure he's not still around." His voice softened as he looked at her. "You're safe now, Willa. I'm home." Those simple words, "I'm home," nearly undid her. Tears threatened, but Willa blinked them back, allowing Martha to lead her inside while Isaac organized the men to search the ranch. In the kitchen, Martha prepared tea while Willa recounted the previous night's events, including her encounter with Thornton in town the week before. The older woman listened with growing indignation. "That vile man," she muttered. "He needs to be locked up before he hurts someone." Willa sipped her tea, feeling the warmth seep into her cold hands. "I thought I was being foolish, letting his words in town frighten me so much, but he meant every threat." "You weren't foolish," Martha assured her. "You were cautious, and it saved you. Many women wouldn't have had the courage to do what you did." Before Willa could respond, Isaac entered the kitchen, his expression still grim but somewhat relieved. "No sign of him on the property. Thomas and the others are keeping watch just in case." He moved to Willa's side, kneeling beside her chair. "Are you hurt? Did he touch you?" "No," Willa replied. "I'm just tired and shaken." Isaac's hand covered hers, warm and reassuring. "You were brave, smarter and braver than most would have been." Martha cleared her throat. "I'll just go check on Hank, see if he's ready to ride for the sheriff." With a knowing smile, she slipped out of the kitchen, leaving them alone. As soon as she was gone, Isaac pulled Willa into his arms, holding her tightly as if afraid she might disappear. "When I saw you standing there with that rifle, looking like you hadn't slept all night." He drew back, framing her face with his hands. "I've never been so terrified in my life." The tenderness in his voice broke the dam of Willa's emotions. Tears spilled down her cheeks as weeks of longing, followed by a night of fear, finally caught up with her. "I missed you so much," she whispered. "And then last night when he came, all I could think was that I might never see you again." Isaac brushed away her tears with his thumbs. "Nothing will keep me from you, Willa. Not a cattle drive, not Thornton, not anything in this world." He kissed her then, a kiss that spoke of homecoming and relief and a love that had grown stronger in absence. Willa clung to him, drawing strength from his solid presence, feeling truly safe for the first time since he'd left. When they finally parted, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Willa Gardner. I think I have since the moment I saw you standing so bravely on that auction platform." Joy bloomed in Willa's heart, pushing aside the lingering fear. "I love you too, Isaac, so much," he smiled, the first real smile she'd seen since his return. "Then marry me, be my wife, my partner in everything. Make this place truly your home." "Yes," Willa replied without hesitation. "Yes, I'll marry you." The sound of horses approaching interrupted their moment. Through the window, they could see Hank returning with Sheriff Matthews and 2 deputies. Isaac sighed, reluctantly releasing Willa. "Duty calls, but this conversation isn't over." He pressed one more quick kiss to her lips before going to meet the law officers. The sheriff took Willa's statement, his expression growing increasingly troubled as she described Thornton's threats and actions. "This is serious," he said when she had finished. "Breaking and entering, attempted assault. We'll find him, Miss Gardner, you have my word." Isaac, who had remained by her side throughout, nodded grimly. "See that you do, Sheriff, because if you don't, I will." Sheriff Matthews gave Isaac a warning look. "Let the law handle this, Fullerton. I understand your feelings, but vigilante justice isn't the answer." "Just find him," Isaac replied, his tone leaving no doubt about what would happen if the sheriff failed. After the sheriff and his deputies departed to begin their search, Isaac insisted Willa rest. Despite her protests that she had work to do, he led her to his own room in the main house, declaring she would be safer there than in her cabin. "Sleep," he commanded gently. I'll be right outside if you need anything. Exhaustion won out over propriety. Willa sank onto the bed, inhaling the comforting scent of leather and pine that seemed to cling to everything Isaac owned. Within moments, she was asleep, secure in the knowledge that he was nearby, keeping watch. She slept through the afternoon and into early evening, waking only when Martha came to check on her. The older woman brought fresh clothes and helped Willa wash and change, her manner motherly and comforting. "Isaac's pacing a hole in the floorboards out there," Martha said with affectionate exasperation. "Been like a caged mountain lion since you fell asleep, wouldn't even take time to eat properly." Willa smiled, warmed by the evidence of Isaac's concern. "He proposed, Martha, asked me to marry him." Martha's face lit up. "Well, it's about time. I've been watching you two dance around each other for months." She squeezed Willa's hand. "I couldn't be happier, dear. You're exactly what he needs, what this place needs." When Willa emerged from the bedroom, she found Isaac in the kitchen, a cup of coffee cooling before him, his expression distant and troubled. At the sight of her, he stood immediately, crossing to her side. "You look better," he said, his eyes searching her face. "More rested." "I feel better," Willa assured him. "Any word from the sheriff?" Isaac shook his head. "Not yet. They're checking Thornton's usual haunts in town. He'll turn up eventually." "And when he does?" Willa asked, hearing the edge in Isaac's voice. "He'll face justice," Isaac replied simply. "One way or another." Willa laid a hand on his arm. "Isaac, promise me you won't do anything rash. I couldn't bear it if something happened to you because of me." His expression softened. "Nothing is going to happen to me or to you, I promise." He covered her hand with his own. "But I won't pretend I don't want to make Thornton pay for frightening you, for threatening what's mine." "I'm not yours yet," Willa reminded him teasingly, trying to lighten the mood. A slow smile spread across Isaac's face. "No, but you will be, soon." The next morning brought news from town. Sheriff Matthews rode out to the ranch just after breakfast to inform them that Thornton had been found drunk in a back room of his saloon. He was now in jail, charged with breaking and entering, attempted assault, and making criminal threats. "He'll face the judge when the circuit court comes through next week," the sheriff explained. "Given his record and the nature of the charges, he's looking at a significant sentence. You'll need to testify, Miss Gardner." Willa nodded, relieved that Thornton had been captured but apprehensive about having to face him again in court. "I'll be there." Isaac, standing protectively at her side, addressed the sheriff. "Will he be released before the trial?" "No," the sheriff assured them. "I've set bail high enough to ensure he stays put. And I've deputized additional men to guard the jail, just in case his friends get any ideas about helping him." After the sheriff left, Isaac turned to Willa. "You don't have to testify if it's too difficult." "I can speak to the judge, explain what happened." Willa shook her head firmly. "No, I need to do this, for myself and for any other woman Thornton might have targeted if he'd succeeded with me." Pride flashed in Isaac's eyes. "You're the strongest woman I've ever known, Willa Gardner." "Not always," she admitted, "but I'm learning to be." The week leading up to the trial was busy with ranch work and preparations for winter. Isaac insisted that Willa continue to stay in the main house, moving her belongings from the cabin for safety's sake. Though the arrangement raised a few eyebrows among the ranch hands, no one commented directly. It was clear to all that Miss Gardner had become more than just an employee of the Fullerton ranch. The day of the trial dawned clear and cool. Willa dressed carefully in her best dress, a deep blue one that Martha had helped her alter to fit properly. Isaac wore a suit that transformed him from rugged rancher to imposing gentleman, though nothing could quite tame the wildness in his blue eyes or the strength evident in his stance. The courtroom in Coloma was packed when they arrived. Word of the incident had spread throughout the community, drawing curious onlookers and supporters from both sides. Thornton had friends and town men who frequented his saloon and shared his questionable ethics, but he had also made many enemies over the years. Willa held her head high as she walked down the aisle, Isaac's hand steady at her back. She refused to show fear, though her stomach twisted with nerves at the prospect of seeing Thornton again. When he was brought in, shackled and disheveled from his time in jail, Willa forced herself to look directly at him. His eyes met hers with undisguised hatred, but she did not look away. She would not give him the satisfaction of seeing her cower. The trial proceeded swiftly. Willa testified clearly and factually about both encounters with Thornton, the threatening conversation in town, and his attempt to break into the ranch house. She described his threats, his forcible entry, and her actions to protect herself. Throughout her testimony, she remained composed, her voice steady even when describing the most frightening moments. Thornton took the stand in his own defense, claiming he had merely gone to the ranch to speak with Willa about a misunderstanding. He denied making threats and insisted he had broken the door only because he feared she might be in danger after hearing the gunshot. His lies were transparent, his manner increasingly belligerent as the trial progressed. By the time he stepped down from the witness stand, it was clear from the judge's expression that his testimony had done more harm than good to his case. The verdict came swiftly, guilty on all charges. The judge, a stern man with a reputation for fair but harsh sentences, addressed Thornton directly. "Mr. Thornton, your actions demonstrate a disturbing disregard for the law and for the safety and dignity of others. This court sentences you to 5 years in the state penitentiary. Additionally, upon your release, you are prohibited from returning to Coloma or contacting Miss Gardner in any way." A murmur ran through the courtroom. The sentence was severe but just. Willa felt a wave of relief wash over her as Thornton was led away, still hurling threats and obscenities until the jail door closed behind him. Outside the courthouse, Isaac pulled Willa into his arms, heedless of the curious glances from passers-by. "It's over," he said softly. "He can't hurt you now." Willa leaned into his embrace, drawing strength from his solid presence. "Thank you for being here with me today. Always," Isaac promised. "Wherever you need me, that's where I'll be." As they walked toward their wagon, Sheriff Matthews approached. "Miss Gardner, Mr. Fullerton. The judge asked me to convey his admiration for your courage, miss. It's not easy to stand up to a man like Thornton." "No," Willa agreed, "but necessary," the sheriff nodded. "Indeed. Well, you won't have to worry about him for a good long while." And after 5 years in prison, most men think twice before returning to their old ways. After thanking the sheriff, Isaac helped Willa into the wagon and set off for the ranch. The late October sunshine warmed them as they traveled, the road winding through hills touched with autumn colors. "I've been thinking," Isaac said after they had ridden in comfortable silence for a time. "We should set a date for the wedding." Willa smiled. "I'd like that soon." "As soon as you wish," he replied, "though we should probably wait until after harvest." "November, then," Willa suggested. Before the winter storm set in. Isaac reached over to take her hand. "November it is, just a simple ceremony unless you want something more elaborate." Willa shook her head. "Simple is perfect, just us, Hank and Martha, a few friends, nothing fancy." They spent the rest of the journey planning their future together: the wedding, improvements to the ranch, dreams of children someday. By the time they reached home, Willa felt lighter than she had in months, the shadow of Thornton's threats finally lifted from her heart. The wedding took place on the 3rd Saturday in November, a clear, crisp day with the promise of winter in the air. The ceremony was held in the parlor of the main house, which had been transformed with autumn flowers and ribbons under Martha's expert direction. Willa wore a gown of ivory silk, ordered from Sacramento and altered to fit her perfectly. Isaac had insisted on buying it for her, overriding her protests about the expense. "A bride should have a proper wedding dress," he had said firmly, "even if it's only worn once." The minister from the Coloma church officiated, his words simple and heartfelt as Isaac and Willa exchanged vows. Hank stood as Isaac's best man while Martha, beaming with maternal pride, attended Willa. A small group of neighbors and friends from town witnessed the union, their presence adding to the sense of community and new beginnings. When Isaac slipped the gold band onto Willa's finger, a band he had secretly commissioned from a goldsmith in Sacramento. Crafted from California gold, his hands were steady, but his eyes revealed the depth of his emotion. I, Isaac, take thee, Willa, to be my wedded wife, he said, his deep voice clear in the quiet room. To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part. Willa repeated the vows in turn, her heart so full she could barely speak the words. When the minister pronounced them man and wife, Isaac kissed her with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes, tears of joy, of completion, of coming home at last. The celebration afterward was simple but joyful. Martha had outdone herself with the wedding feast, and the ranch hands had constructed a makeshift dance floor in the barn, cleared of hay and decorated with lanterns and more autumn flowers. Music was provided by Thomas, who proved surprisingly skilled with a fiddle, and one of the neighboring ranchers who played the harmonica. As evening approached, Isaac led Willa onto the dance floor for their first dance as husband and wife. He held her close, moving with unexpected grace for a man more accustomed to the saddle than the ballroom. "Happy, Mrs. Fullerton?" he asked softly, his breath warm against her ear. The name, her new name, sent a thrill through Willa. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she replied honestly. Isaac's arms tightened around her. "When I rode into that saloon 7 months ago, I never imagined this would be the outcome. I just wanted to help someone in trouble. And instead, you found a wife," Willa finished, smiling up at him. "The best wife a man could ask for," he agreed, his eyes reflecting the lantern light and his own inner happiness. As they danced, Willa reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From the humiliation of the auction block to the dignity of becoming Mrs. Isaac Fullerton, from despair to joy, from isolation to belonging, it had been a path neither of them could have foreseen. "What are you thinking?" Isaac asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "That sometimes the worst moments in life lead to the best," Willa replied. "If my father hadn't died, if I hadn't fallen into debt, if I hadn't been put up for auction, I never would have found you." Isaac's expression grew serious. "I thank God every day that I was in town that afternoon, that I heard about the auction and went to see for myself." He shook his head slightly. "The thought of you ending up with Thornton or one of those others." "But I didn't," Willa reminded him gently. "You saved me, asked for nothing in return, and now here we are." The music ended, and other couples joined them on the dance floor for the next song. Isaac led Willa to a quiet corner where they could observe the festivities. "Did I ever tell you why I was in town that day?" he asked unexpectedly. Willa shook her head. "I assumed it was for ranch business." "It was, in a way," Isaac admitted. "I was looking for a housekeeper. Martha had been after me to hire someone to help around the place, said she was getting too old to manage it all." Willa laughed softly. "So you went looking for a housekeeper and came home with a wife." Isaac smiled, the rare, unguarded smile that never failed to warm Willa's heart. "Best trade I ever made." As the celebration continued around them, Isaac drew Willa outside, where the stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. The air was cold now, promising frost by morning, but neither noticed as they stood together, looking out over the land that was now truly theirs together. "I love you, Willa Fullerton," Isaac said, his arm around her waist. "More than this land, more than this ranch, more than anything in this world." Willa turned in his embrace, reaching up to touch his face, memorizing every line and plane by touch as well as sight. "And I love you, Isaac Fullerton, my savior, my husband, my heart." He kissed her then, a kiss that spoke of promises kept and promises yet to come, of a future built on mutual respect and deep affection, of challenges faced together, of a love that had begun in an act of selfless kindness and grown into something enduring and true. As they returned to their guests, hand in hand, Willa knew with absolute certainty that no matter what life might bring, harsh winters or bountiful harvests, sickness or health, joy or sorrow, they would face it together, equal partners in the life they were building. And she would never forget how it had begun, with a cowboy who had paid her debts and asked for nothing in return, giving her instead the most precious gift of all, the freedom to choose her own path. That she had chosen him, that their paths had become one, was a blessing neither took for granted. In the years that followed, the Fullerton Ranch prospered under their joint care. Willa's garden expanded to provide much of their food year-round, and she became known in the area for her preserves and herbal remedies. Isaac's breeding program produced horses sought after throughout California and beyond. Together, they weathered droughts and harsh winters, economic fluctuations and personal challenges. Their greatest joy came 2 years after their wedding, with the birth of their son, Samuel, followed 18 months later by a daughter, Elizabeth. The children thrived in the ranch environment, learning to ride almost as soon as they could walk, helping with age-appropriate chores, and absorbing their parents' values of hard work, honesty, and compassion. Willa never did become the schoolteacher she had once envisioned. Instead, she taught her own children and occasionally others from neighboring ranches, creating an informal school in a room added to the main house specifically for that purpose. Isaac continued to carve in the evenings, his skill growing with practice. The small wooden horse he had given Willa before their first cattle drive was joined by many other pieces, a family of deer on the mantelpiece, intricate toys for the children, a chess set that took an entire winter to complete. They rarely spoke of the auction or of Thornton, who served his full sentence and then moved to Nevada, never returning to Coloma. Those events, pivotal as they had been, were simply the beginning of their story, not its defining chapter. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Isaac surprised Willa with a special gift, the deed to the ranch, amended to include her name alongside his as equal owner. "It should have been this way from the beginning," he said as she examined the document with tear-filled eyes. "This place has been as much yours as mine since the day you arrived," Willa smiled through her tears. "It became mine the moment you made it a home rather than just a place to stay." Isaac took her in his arms, still as strong and solid as he had been a decade earlier, though silver now threaded more prominently through his dark hair. "No regrets about the path your life took," Willa shook her head. "Not one. Every step led me here to you, to our children, to this life we've built together." "Even the auction?" Isaac asked, his expression serious. "Even that," Willa confirmed. "It was humiliating, frightening, the lowest moment of my life, but without it we wouldn't be standing here now." She reached up to touch his face, a gesture that had become habitual over the years. Sometimes the things that seem like endings are really beginnings in disguise. Isaac caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. "Then here's to beginnings, Mrs. Fullerton, and to many more years together." "Many more," Willa agreed, her heart full of gratitude for the man who had saved her from servitude, only to willingly offer his own heart in service to her happiness. As they stood together on the porch of the home they had built with love and labor, watching their children play in the yard, Willa reflected that some debts could never truly be repaid, not the monetary kind that had once threatened her freedom, but the deeper debts of the heart. The debt she owed Isaac for his initial kindness, the debt he claimed to owe her for bringing joy and purpose to his life, the mutual debt they owed to fate or providence for bringing them together. These were debts they would spend a lifetime repaying, not with gold or labor, but with love freely given and gratefully received, the most valuable currency of all.